Welcome to Impact Masters Podcast in collaboration with Africa's Talking Retold Podcast, where every conversation sparks new insights. Join us as we delve into the stories of extraordinary individuals who are shaping our world. Movers and shakers in tech, policymakers, entrepreneurs, entertainers, and all those whose stories are worth telling. Get ready to be inspired, challenged, and transformed. Welcome, and let's embark on this journey of discovery together. Impact Masters Podcast. You can check us out on all social media platforms. You can also find us across all podcast channels. Simply search for Impact Masters, then subscribe, follow, and share. www.impactmasters.io. Here's your host, Michael Kamathi.
And that is a true leadership and guided by love. Because to some extent, I feel like the definition of love has really metamorphosized to different meaning. To some extent, material love, and the real love which you could actually feel without even someone saying something has totally changed to an extent that you have to prove that you love someone, or someone has to prove they understand you love them. And in between, that's where there's always that confusion of, is this really genuine? And if it's genuine, what is the intention? So, and I think you come from a country where, we always look up to, given it's the leader of the world per se, or the superpower. And everyone wants to say, these guys, they got it right. They have an experience of 200 years. These are the leaders. Let's look at it. But that's not the case to some extent. And that's why even right now, if you're in a country like Kenya and you look around, you ask yourself, what is the purpose of all this? So I agree with you that one of the things that we need to factor as leaders, beyond our profession, beyond our doctorate, being a professor, is do we even listen to understand what the other person needs to really learn? Because if, for instance, someone can learn better in a YouTube video, are we really engaging there? If someone can learn on a Twitter space, are we engaging there? And so on and so forth. But my question would be around leadership again. Mm-hmm. What does it take to get a good leader?
Well, it takes a better education system to start.
Yeah.
But it also takes a willingness on the part of those who are led to let leaders be human beings and fail.
Yeah.
Right? Because it's really interesting to think about that dialectic between those who are led and those who lead. Mm-hmm. So often you'll hear young people say, we want leaders who are open. Mm-hmm. We want leaders who will create a space for us. We want to be seen. We want to be heard. Yeah. Those are very reasonable things to want. Yeah. They're deeply human things to want. Mm. But sometimes you get a leader who does that. Oh, that leader's not strong.
Yeah.
That leader doesn't know what they're doing.
Yeah.
That leader has disappointed us because they created this space, but now things aren't moving fast enough, right? Mm-hmm. So in a funny way, as people who are led, we shape our leaders, even as our leaders shape us as people who are led. And that goes back to that point about how do you get out of a groove where it's the same old thing? It's really not easy. I'm at a school where students come because they feel that their education should be a force for uniting people and for creating a world that is more peaceful and more sustainable. Yeah. They come for that reason.
Yeah.
And yet, when something happens that they're upset about or that they don't understand, do they come and ask? Do they call a meeting? Do they step back and say, okay, how are we going to, approach this? No, they fall into the same old groove. Admin who's admin? Do you mean me? Right? Because if you mean me, I'm going to tell you if I did that. Right? There's no admin. There's me. There's Andrew. There's Naomi. There are lots of people. Accountability. So even the way they start to talk, they're giving me a pass. Right? Admin did this. That's giving me a pass. If I did it, call me in on it. Don't call me out, because no one wants to be called out. But call me in on it. Tell me, hey, I think you, as I understand it, you did this. And this is very upsetting to the student body. I want to hear it. I can't create that space if young people won't step into it without making it into that space of us and them. It happens in schools. It happens in politics all the time, right? So that people are just screaming past each other. And if we're going to change the world in any way that creates a wholeness and a space, the only way that's going to happen is if people refuse to get into the same old groove from wherever they're sitting or standing. But that's not easy. That's work. That's hard work. It's much easier just to do what we've always done. It's easier to teach what we've always taught.
Because there's something to refer to.
That's right.
And avoid to fail.
That's right.
So do you think we really celebrate failure?
No.
We
no, I mean, I think we talk about it. And, what do we do the minute someone fails? We spank them. We spank them publicly. Oh my gosh. I mean, from literal spankings, with corporal punishment. I don't know if they, still do it here, but that ended in the United States, but that's what we used to do. Your handwriting isn't perfect. We smack your hand. Well, that's going to make you want to write better?
No.
No, you're like, why would it? Right?
You deal with the pain.
But we do the same thing with, somebody who does poorly on a test. Do we offer, hey, why don't you go back? Let's talk about it again. Let's study it again. Come back and take it again. No, we say, no, that's your grade. You don't get a second chance. You failed at that. You better do better next time. Whereas what keeps us from saying, you know what? Let's stop. Clearly, you missed it, or I missed sharing it with you in a way that you could absorb it. Let's do it again. Right? So no, we don't encourage failure in any way. We certainly don't celebrate it. And yet, think about the failures you've had in your life. Don't you learn more from failure than you do from success? I have.
Absolutely. That's where the biggest lessons are. As a career academic, you have seen so many generations from millennials. Now we have Gen Zs. I'm sure very soon you'll be getting Gen Alpha. And all of these actually present different challenges academically and socially and philosophically.
Yes.
And for you, as a Vice President for Development and Alumni Relations, and as a Dean of the College, how did you shape this so that you can learn, the alumni can bring some richness in the current generation that is taking, maybe similar course or maybe the newer course, and create some sort of maybe patience with the process and also some wisdom across sharing in that process?
Yeah, so when I was at St. John's, I think I really resisted the idea of kind of generational differences. I think I really, and I probably still do in some deep way. I tend to think of human beings as human beings, and each of us is at different stages in our journey. And that stage will determine what my response needs to be in a given moment. It doesn't always lead to what, in terms of optics, looks like consistency, right? But if you're really meeting a young person where they are on their journey, sometimes that might mean emphasizing accountability. You might ask them to leave the school. Sometimes it might mean giving an opportunity, a chance to make it right. And they stay. Of course, someone on the outside might say, you're not consistent. You're not fair, right? But part of leadership and part of developing young people is recognizing where they are on their journey. The interesting thing about generational thinking, and I have begun to see more patterns in different generations. And I even am catching patterns in myself as, one of the last of the baby boomers, right? And I can see certain patterns in my thought. I think, that too has to be part of the calculus, part of the assessment of where to meet someone on their journey, even as their cultural underpinnings come into play, even as their gender expression or understanding come into play. All of that becomes part of how I've learned I need to navigate. That's exhausting, right?
Yeah.
It tells you why educators are much more comfortable just saying, this is the way it's been done.
Yeah.
You are going to fit into this way that it's been done.
Yeah.
You go home a lot less tired.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And I think there's some of the institutions that have changed that immensely, and the rewards are also huge. I would give a couple of examples, but I'll be giving credit for them. But of course, in the US, I know a couple. But also even here in Kenya, students who have gone out of their way to be curious enough, especially in engineering, and I'm sure even in philosophy, they've really reaped big as opposed to someone who sticks to, I'm going to get an A and anything else is not important. Once I get a first class, I'll figure out where I'm going to get a job. And then once I get a job, I get a wife. So I get a wife, I get, the process.
Yes.
But now when life is not a straight line. When the eventualities happen, they get confused and lost in there. Things like depression is becoming a big issue. I was in the state a few weeks ago, and one of the states declared loneliness as an epidemic. I was so taken aback. And so many other underlying issues that actually come with just taking life as a straight line. Yeah. As an educator and interacting with these people, do we fail them in ensuring that they are always rounded by just sticking to the straight line? And if that's the case, what are some of the activities? And I like, maybe if you're familiar with the competency-based curriculum, and I know some of the states actually are implementing it, I would love you to talk a bit, the advantages and disadvantages of competency versus other, stream of education. So what can it be done and how can we do it? And how long would that take to change? Because it's a whole generation. If you start right now, maybe it will take 10 to 15 years to change the way things are done.
No, it'll take a while. I mean, to focus on competencies in a way is to meet a young person where they are in the journey, right? It's not that, I've got to finish this much content in this much time.
Yeah.
And you will either be at the front of the class, you'll be kind of in the middle, or you'll be dragged along. And at its worst, you'll be left behind. But instead of that, it's where are you with your competency and let's keep working, in that direction. And I think it holds out a lot of hope. I think too, even though we want to focus on competence, I don't want to lose the power of sharing with young people some of the most excellent examples of human accomplishment.
Yes.
Whether it's in the arts or the sciences, the humanities, right? So you don't want to lose that.
Yeah.
Finding the marriage between competency and mastery on the one hand, and on the other hand, content that inspires and that opens up the world and that shows us that we're a part of something bigger than ourselves. I mean, that's the balance that you want to strike. And I'm sure if any of my students were listening, they'd say, oh, wait a minute. But, here we are in this heavily content-based curriculum, the International Baccalaureate. And a lot of times students will think that's incompatible with finding where they are on their journey and expressing their freedom, and maybe even incompatible with their mental health because it's such a demanding curriculum.
Yeah.
And what I would say is, like so much of life, it's not what we're doing, it's how we're doing it.
Yeah.
That ends up mattering. Like, what makes the difference between, a hack musician, for example, and an artist? You might be doing the same thing. The what might be the same.
Yeah.
But how you do it, right? How you engage it, how you move with it, how you imagine it and then manifest it.
Yeah.
That's what distinguishes a hack from an artist. And you could say that about anyone. I mean, everybody knows what it's like to be with a nurse who really cares, who really sees you in your moment of pain or suffering and alleviates it out of a sense of calling versus someone who just wants to get through the shift, right? Just wants it to end. And you and that bedpan are the last thing between them and getting to get home. Right? And you feel the difference and you see the difference, right? So it's not always what we do, it's how we do it. And I think that's true for any curriculum that a student might find themselves in, or any kind of situation that we find ourselves in, including our mental health, right? That we feel a certain way is one thing, but how we approach it, how we challenge ourselves to rise to it or to seek help, that's what makes the difference. And I think we forget that. We learn a kind of helplessness that says, oh my gosh, I have to be perfect, or I have to be like that influencer on social media. Or I have to be like my brother who was brilliant at this particular subject matter, or like my mother, right? We get into these narratives that undermine us instead of freeing us. We don't have to do that. How we go about living a life is deeply personal. And it's something that can help us to connect to others in ways that gives them access to be able to help us along.
Fantastic. And most of these, approaches, depending where you are in the world, they are quite resource intensive. Even changing a curriculum, that means people buying new books, investing afresh, and so on and so forth. And the old material is literally discarded, which means also other resources are wasted. If you had a stock of books that are not sold as a publisher, you discard that. Also, there's a question of government trying to get funding, trying to allocate resources. If you are in the university, if you have loans, the process is quite rigorous when it comes to resources. But for you, actually, you are a fundraiser. You have mastered the art of donation. And actually, this is good because even here in Kenya, we're talking about people carrying money with the bags and donating in Harambes, which, there's a debate around that. Is this money really going to the cause? Is it the right way to do it? Would this money be better in an hospital or a school or, buying books for people instead of just, donating to some individuals in churches and so on. So also in the US right now, you are going to an election. And one of the key questions that, Biden and Trump are being asked is around the, healthcare and education and the loans. So these are pertinent issues that different leaders in the world are looking at. But for you, you have been doing this to ensure that, the critical aspect of sustaining education institution is met. What strategies have you found most effective in engaging donors, alumni, and parents? And is there any fundraising memorable experience that you remember vividly in that course?
So, the wonderful thing about philanthropy and fundraising is that philanthropy has a great deal to do with philosophy, right? They start with the same root. Philos in Greek is love, love of. And so philosophy, love of wisdom. Philanthropy, love of humanity.
Wow.
Love of human beings. And so philanthropy comes out of love. And to give and to fundraise are really about finding for someone who wants to give where they can express that love of humanity best. It could be in healing the planet, right? It doesn't have to go directly to human beings. But it also could be to support a scholarship for education, whether for one person or for many. And the joy of fundraising is helping someone find where to direct that love for humanity. And so it's not a painful thing to do. It's a quite joyful thing to do if you're listening, if you're meeting that philanthropist where they are on their journey. And, I'll always say, sometimes I know exactly what I want.
Yes.
I know exactly what I want to fund.
Yeah.
But you can't force that with somebody because giving has to be an act of freedom and it has to be an act of love.
Yeah.
And so I find fundraising a joyful experience. I also find I can't fundraise if I don't believe in something. I think it's the difference between a salesperson and a fundraiser, right? I mean, if I have to sell this car, I am going to tell you every good thing about it to get you interested. Well, I might do that to some extent about something I might want to build on my campus or a particular scholarship I want to provide. But in the end, it has to be a real interactive experience and people have to find that place where they're actually seeing the same possibility.
Wow.
And that's when fundraising works.
So would we say confidently that, the love and the purpose has to align?
Exactly.
To some extent to make it.
It has to.
Yeah.
It has to. Otherwise, it's transactional. And for me, philanthropy is not transactional. A lot of times you hear now in philanthropy, people want to know about return on investment. And I worry about that kind of language. Yes, we ought to be able to show that what we're doing is adding value, whether it's to a human being or to a project or to the world, right? So yes, we should be accountable for how we use dollars for sure. But to reduce it to return on investment, how do you measure a child who gets a scholarship return on investment? I mean, I went through school fully on scholarships, all the way through. Somebody believed enough in my education to provide the philanthropy to pay for it.
Yes.
Right? But at any one point during that time, I don't know if I could have demonstrated their return on investment.
Yes.
I hope now that my passion is providing access to students to scholarships that result in education that can be transformative.
Yeah.
I hope that in some sense, that's the return on investment.
And you can't measure it.
But you can't measure it because it's a whole life, right?
Yeah.
Who I am leading United World College USA is one aspect of myself.
Yeah.
Who I am as a wife, as a mother, as a daughter, as a friend, as someone in my community, as someone who will stop to talk to somebody I don't know because they look low. Anything about me, that's all coming from the investment someone made in me. But it's not something that easily lends itself to a metric. And I think that's one of the challenges for philanthropists, that they hear all of that talk of return on investment and they're pushed in directions of transactional thinking. The finest philanthropists, the ones who make huge differences in the world, like one of our most important benefactors at UWC USA and the whole UWC movement, Shelby and Gail Davis, amazingly generous people who are giving scholarships to kids all over the world to come to UWCs and then helping them with their education to go to various colleges and universities in the United States. They are not thinking transactionally. They're thinking about the love of seeing a young person, no matter where they come from, no matter whether they can afford an education, watching those young people open up and blossom. And that's more an act of love than a business transaction. And these are people who clearly have done well in business. They know how to do that. But they recognize human beings aren't transactional in their worth and in their value.
And coincidentally, I also went through my education through scholarship. So I can actually understand in action and words of what that means with the achievements I've been able to accomplish until now. And I know for every purposeful and loving and wise person, as you are, you're always bothered by, different crises that happen. I'm sure we have experienced so many crises between 2024. We are still in crisis with the Gaza and Ukraine. And these are humans who are suffering. And one of the things that calls to someone who is purposeful is to change the tactic, to change the way of leadership, to look things differently, because these are new scenarios presenting themselves.
Yes.
To just ensure that we alleviate pain, we console our brothers and sisters who are in that pain. For you, COVID and wildfires, which were really, we were watching actually almost all California burn out, Seattle and all that. And it was quite really frustrating, given now that with the digital media, news travel as fast as seconds.
Yes.
And you see a family running away from the fire, from what they called home. And these are well-off, some well-off families. And that even changes the dynamic of these are suffering people. But at this particular point, they have been reduced to ashes. All they knew is reduced to ashes. And this caused a change of aspect. So for you, how did these two main crises change your perspective in management and crisis and all this confusion that people experience during that particular time?
Yeah, for COVID, it was really, when the borders started to close down.
Yeah.
And we had students from over 90 countries in our care. The first decision was, do we keep them here? Mm-hmm. And if we keep them here, we don't know what we're facing. We don't know what this is.
Yeah.
But if we send them home, what if they're in greater danger? And so part of the decision making was really to go to our, staff and our faculty and say, can we do this? Can we keep them here? And part of leadership is recognizing when people are ready to do something and when they're not. Mm-hmm. And in the end, we determined, because of the age group of our students, because we didn't know what we were facing, we sent them home. And, they left very quickly to make sure that they got home before their borders closed.
Yeah.
But almost immediately, we started having conversations about what it meant if we didn't bring them back. And one of the fundamental discussion points was, well, for our students who are from a wealthier economic background, they're going to be fine.
Yeah.
Right? They're going to, whether it's education at home, remotely, whether it is going to a local school that will open up, with certain protocols, they're going to be fine. What about the students we have for whom this scholarship is a shot at a whole life that will be transformative, not just for them, but for their families, for their communities? What does it mean if we don't reopen?
Yeah.
And so we got working to reopen, and we brought students. And, for a lot of our UWC students, for whom the wilderness experience is, so special, the arts and culture, the kind of cultural shows that they do to showcase for one another what their cultural experience is around various themes and how they've lived their experience differently because of where they were raised and how they were raised. A lot of that had to be changed because, again, we didn't know what we were dealing with.
Yeah.
Right? And so it was a very different United World College USA experience. And in fact, United World Colleges opened up all over the world in the very following fall after we had sent our students home. And it was really a moment of recognizing how our schools really are microcosms of the world. I mean, part of the comedy for me was hearing students from different countries complain about the protocols that we were using. You know, for example, we made sure that we had them mask when they were with faculty and staff. Why? Because the most likely introduction of the virus after everybody quarantined was going to be people who were going back and forth into town. But where was the likely spread going to be?
In towns.
Among the students.
Oh.
Right? Because they're not going to wear masks when they're together alone. I don't care how many times we told them. But, we had Chinese students who were shocked that we weren't requiring masking in the dormitories. Because at home, everybody was masked all the time, right? But then we had students from Sweden who were shocked that we were masking at all in public because the Swedes weren't masking. So why were we masking? And everything in between. Right? And all of it driven by fear of the unknown. Reasonable. That's how we survive, by being afraid to start. But also being driven by the politics around it, whether it was international politics, our own national politics at the time in the US. So that crisis management was really about constantly asking ourselves, what do we know from the science? As I like to tease the students, we are an educational institution. We might look at the science, right? What do we know? What don't we know? And how can we respond given what we don't know? And how can we do that together in a spirit of cooperation?